Hey everybody, David and Krista with Innovative Improv Solutions. And today, seeing as things in the world can feel a little topsy-turvy at the moment, I think is fair to say, um, and workplaces and home environments, everything can feel a little shaky. Krista and I thought it might be nice just to talk about getting back to some of the very basics of communication, in particular, listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when our brains are going in a million different directions, as I think we all might feel a little bit right now, and there's worry and anxiety on top of things, and then, uh, you know, your brains are just, I know my brain's going a million miles a minute, and it's hard to listen when that's happening because you're listening. I don't know everybody else. You're listening to like yourself in your head, as opposed to listening to what the other person is saying.
And you know what? In the world of improv, they talk about you're going to feel some stress when you're doing an improvised scene because you're getting a suggestion, you have a paying audience, and one of the ways to relieve the tension and anxiety is if you really listen to your partner, the anxiety starts to subside, which is why Krista and I teach. We use this improv module when we teach about communication because that's what improv is heightened communication training and heightened listening.
Mhm.
And I think when our brains are going a million miles a minute, we have to think a few things. We have to think, okay, really listen.
Mhm.
Also take it one step at a time.
Mhm.
Because I know like you, Krista, my brain too can get, it starts to jump ahead. And if we just kind of say, okay, just a reminder, like, I got to take it one step at a time here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, one of my dear friends always says you can't make decisions unless you have all of the information. If you don't have the information, she always says, and if you don't have the information, you can't make the decision. And so, sometimes one of the things, David, you talk about a lot, which I love, is like living in the wreckage of your future. It's
Mm.
like this idea of I've already decided what the outcome is going to be. I've already decided I'm not even listening anymore because I've already just decided it's going to be hard, awful, full of anxiety, or I've already decided that I'm going to do it on my own, or whatever that thing is that we cut off listening because we've already decided the outcome. And then, truthfully, I've talked a lot in the coaching modules about how we tend to, if you're coaching an employee, they will do it if they are part of the solution of the problem that's happening. So for example, we've talked about how if someone is running late all of the time and you really just need them to show up on time, but then once you have a conversation with them, you realize they run late because they drop off their kid at daycare and daycare doesn't open till a specific time, and as hard as they try, they're 5 minutes late well, now because you've listened, you all can problem solve that together, as opposed to just deciding that it's for some other reason, or that it's just because someone's not respecting you, or whatever it is. Like, our brains, I think, tend to jump into things that aren't necessarily true because our brains are wired to make things up for our safety. So listening and really staying present and really focusing on that skill slows things down. It allows us to remain present to what's happening and actually solve the problem that is there, as opposed to the problem that we've made up.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting how living in the wreckage of your future can apply to ourselves, right? Oh, I've just assumed I get assigned a difficult task. I assume that I'm not going to be able to do that, or I am feeling anxious already. It's not going to go well. But we also, like you said, do it with other people. I assume that person is doing this behavior or this thing because, right?
Mm.
But again, having the conversation. And what I was thinking about when you were just talking too is if that if we are really conscious of listening to somebody and showing them uh, not only not only adding to what they said, but being there in presence, right, as they're talking, right? Sometimes that's all it takes is someone to feel heard and seen. And
Yeah.
I talk about in the workshops too, a lot of times, really realize people that when you are a good listener, and by the way, it's not easy because we're not really taught to do it. When you are a good listener, it makes you a much more attractive person. In other words, you're somebody that people trust and want to be around. And and by the way, I think a lot of times too, Krista, it's there's a subconsciousness to it. It's not like they want, I don't go, oh, Krista's a great listener, right? But there's an overall feeling of, oh, there's a comfort zone in there with that person.
I feel cared for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, I mean, when you're talking about leadership, the reason why that listening piece is so powerful is because it gives you a roadmap on how to work with people. We talk a lot about in certain classes around that sort of influence without authority, which is a great book, piece. And so so much of that is, is listening so that what is going to motivate somebody to engage or to go that extra step, or to or is going to make them feel fulfilled in the workspace, because it's way cheaper to keep people happy and growing where they are than it is to constantly be trying to replace people and retrain them. So listening is such a big piece of that puzzle for managers and leadership, so that they can really help motivate and engage everybody on the team to be heading towards that goal. If Robert is really motivated by being in the group and Sally is really motivated by someone praising her, then those are really important things to get to know and understand, so that you can work as a team in a way that moves everybody forward. Hey, David, I've got a question for you. So when you are in a position where it's hard to listen, or you're
Mhm.
thinking like your brain's going whatever, what are some tricks for you to like sort of come back into your body and really focus on listening? What do you do?
Sometimes, sometimes I literally have to say to myself in my head, "You're drifting. Listen. You're
Mm,
drifting. Listen." Sometimes I have to feel the ground under my feet, right? Literally, think and get grounded.
yeah,
Um, if I if there's something I want to respond to, but I don't want to cut them off yet, I just kind of tuck that away in my head, and every now and then I'll just think about it so I don't forget that point.
hmm,
It's a great question because sometimes it's this, right? So I've got to listen, and I also might want to, I have some thoughts, but I don't want to cut them off yet. And every now and then I will do this. I will say, can you just hold that thought for a second? Because I don't want to lose this thought that I just had in regards to that, and then say it. And then, okay, go ahead. Sorry about
yeah,
that, but I just want to make sure I got that out there.
yeah.
That's, one thing too. Um, it's so funny you say that because the other day I was in a situation where I really did want to respond, but I literally just tell myself, listen, listen,
Yeah.
listen. I tend to be a little bit of an anxious and fidgety person sometimes too. So I also focus on keeping myself, I want to visually keep myself pretty calm and still.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think, before we got jumped on this call, I told you, I said sometimes in my brain, I literally repeat what someone has said inside my brain, which I know sounds crazy making, but it's sort of, I wonder if it's back from when I was trained to be an interpreter, and it's sort of like I was an interpreter for American Sign Language, and so I'd have to hear what someone was saying, sort of interpret it in my brain, and then bring
Mm,
it out in my hands. But I think that slows me down and lets me stay present. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, especially if you're in a conversation where you need to be holding space for someone, for whatever, there's big feelings, there's big stuff happening. I think that listening to try to grab those um, things that I can repeat back empathetically is really helpful too. And that probably is
mm.
the same type of thing in a business conversation, even when there aren't big feelings, is to be able to say things like, let me just recap what you said. Sounds like you have had a really hard day. Like whatever those, or, whatever those things are that you're wanting to come back with, and sort of in your own words, that helps me too, is to sort of not be listening to respond, because I think that's, um, like sort of, that's a listening to respond with my own agenda, but like
Mm.
listening to respond and support, which I think is a real core value of like that yes and that we talk about. It's like I'm going to listen to respond in a way that shows I listened, and then I can move on and add to that. Um, yeah, I think I have to physically, we talked about this earlier too. This is a neurodivergent thing. I have to really physically think about my face and my body language and make sure, make sure that RBF is not happening, which is really hard on Zoom because everybody, like, all of our faces.
Yeah.
So like, but really, I think that helps me stay engaged too. It's like I used to have someone in high school, that my theater teacher in high school, she used to go like, act enthusiastic and you'll be enthusiastic. We used to have to say it over and over again. But there is something too, when you're listening, to saying, I'm going to do the cues. I'm going to nod. I'm going to have my eyes open. And there's something about that engages you to listen differently.
Well, you and I think we're talking the other day about Zoom calls,
Yeah.
and we get a lot of questions in our workshops about, well, we love this thing face to face and all that, but what about on Zoom? And I think almost all of it applies.
Mhm.
All the same stuff. You got to think about your tone, you have to think about visual cues, you have to listen. And I think you brought up that if I'm on a Zoom call like you and I are doing now, and the second I do this, where I look away, right? That's it's pretty off-putting to somebody. So even if it's if it's a group of, let's say, 8 people or 4 people or whatever, that movement to something else is very distracting. And
Yeah.
that is a That's the thing with Zoom that you have to be very, very careful with, I think, because in a regular conference room or something, i- that environment's a little different. So if somebody checks a phone for a second, I don't know, it's not as jarring.
Well, your frame, to speak in film terms, is wider.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
our
there you go.
frame is little here. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
Oh,
that's
that's a
why
good point.
I often will try to say if that's something's happening like that, I'll often say, I'm going to look up the answer to that question you just asked. And I just say it so people aren't thinking that I'm checking out. Um, but yeah, it's a different animal that we're all learning. And we've all gotten some pretty, I think, some not great habits through the years of Zoom being one of those things.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a lot of grace for one another in that, but I think, you know, it's it's good to try to think about how can I feel connected in this way too.
Well,
Um,
I think at first with the Zoom thing, everybody was really disciplined with it. And, oh, I'm gonna have
yeah,
a really easy background. And then now it's like
no,
a
like
lot
I
of
got my
people don't even have
hoodie.
their, yeah, or they don't even have their picture up, which
Yeah.
is,
Which is really hard on the person who's leading. I
yeah,
mean, it's just,
yeah,
and I know people don't understand that. And listen, there's a whole neurodivergent aspect to that and not wanting to be on camera. And there's a lot of stuff around that. But it's really, so that's really interesting. But I will tell you, if as a facilitator, it is really tough to connect and
yeah,
and to want to listen to you when you're
yeah.
staring at a blank screen. It's just hard. And, and you're sitting there going like, I'm gonna do it, but it's a blank screen. So we
Yeah.
have to wrap this one up, but I think that, getting back to basics, we were just saying earlier that, we have an ache, I think, as humans to want to be seen and heard. And the best way, I think, to be seen and heard by others is to start by first modeling how you see and hear others.
Yeah.
So I, really think about listening and how powerful it can be and how that's an easy thing that you can do to really create trust and some engagement with those that you work with.
And our exercises, what we do in the workshops is we bring these improv exercises in as a mechanism to exaggerate, right, what happens in, because an improv is just all it is it's a difficult interaction. It's a
Yeah.
stressful interaction, right? So one of the first things we teach is don't let anything get by you, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you hear every little thing because the scene in the acting world of improv can be about one little thing that comes up, but we generally we as humans want to think ahead. So a
Yeah.
lot of it, so we use these exercises to get your brain to slow down a bit and really
Yeah.
respond to what you just heard.
Yeah. And and it's fun. You laugh a lot
Yeah,
and you feel it, which is why the change is lasting. All right. That's it for
great.
today. We'll see you the next time.